No surprises. Senate will please come to order.
So she'll reach out to him?
Good afternoon. Today's devotional will be led by Rabbi Toby Weissman, the Director of Jewish Communities of Vermont. Welcome.
Good afternoon. Happy spring. It's nice to be here again. I wanted to share a beautiful teaching that I learned this week from Rabbi Leibush Hundert. He's the director of a wonderful yeshiva in Jerusalem called Simchat Shlomo. As we all know, today is Thursday, April 27th. It's 1 o'clock in the afternoon. As human beings, we're always counting. We're putting a number on the day, our age, another person's age, and of course, how much money we have, how much money another person has, how many friends do we have, how many Facebook friends do we have, how many degrees do we have, how much have we accomplished so far in our lives. In the Jewish tradition, we're always counting too, yet we're all also taught to count in a different way. A few weeks ago, we celebrated Passover, and I know Easter was celebrated, Ramadan also. But contrary to popular belief, Passover is not over. Passover is still happening, because between Passover and 7 weeks of counting, we have the Jewish holiday of Shavuot, which actually means weeks. 7 weeks of counting every single day before we celebrate receiving the Torah on Mount Sinai. So, what is the significance of counting these days between Passover and Shavuot? 49 days we count. Each day of the 7 weeks between Passover and Shavuot, we are examining ourselves. We're examining psychological and spiritual aspect of ourselves. So, for example, today, we are examining the dignity within our compassion that we have. We are asking ourselves to reflect on the following question: is my compassion expressed in a dignified manner? Is my compassion bringing dignity to others? The most important lesson we can learn and teach each other from this counting is that our days count, our actions count, our every action counts. Every little bit of good that we do in the world, in our day, in our every action, in our every moment of our day counts. It really counts. And every way we can be a little bit more kind, a little bit more compassionate, a little bit more thoughtful of others, we can bring more healing to ourselves, to our own lives, and to the lives of all those around us. There was a beautiful Rabbi Nachman of Bratslav, who taught that when we do acts of righteousness, like giving of our time, our money, doing good deeds, this air around us becomes purified. It actually becomes sweeter. And instead of dividing us, the air unites us. So we need to ask ourselves every day and throughout the moments of our day is what I'm about to do going to lift others up? Is what I'm about to do going to bring dignity to others? Is it going to be helpful? Will people feel like they really matter, like they really count? Today, through our good deeds and our thoughtful actions, let's make the air around us sweeter, connecting us to one another instead of creating more division. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any announcements? Seeing none, we have two bills for referral under Rule 31. The first being H206, affecting the expenditures of the state, will be referred to the Committee on Appropriations, and H476, also affecting the expenditures of the state, will be referred to the Committee on Appropriations. We now have a Senate resolution for introduction. Please listen to the reading of the resolution by title.
SR 11, Senate resolution to support the continuing resiliency and strengthening of the Abenaki communities in Vermont and encouraging a greater appreciation and respect for Abenaki culture during Abenaki Recognition and Heritage Week and throughout the year.
Now you've heard the reading of the resolution by title, and it will be referred to the Committee on Government Operations. We have one bill for introduction. It is S-151. It was introduced by Senator Lyons. Please listen to the first reading of the bill by title.
S-151, an act relating to pay parity and transparency in healthcare.
Now you've heard the first reading of the bill is referred to the Committee on Health and Welfare. We have two House bills for referral, the first being H504, introduced by Representatives Gosselin and Donahue. Please listen to the first reading of the bill.
H504, an act relating to approval of amendments to the Charter of the Town of Berlin.
Now you've heard the first reading of the bill is referred to the committee, to the Rules Committee under Rule 44A. We now have H505, introduced by Representative Clifford and others. Please listen to the first reading of the bill.
H505, an act relating to approval of an amendment to the Charter of the City of Rutland.
Now you've heard the first reading of the bill. Also pursuant to Rule 44A, the bill is referred to the Committee on Rules. That brings us to the orders of the day. Senator from Chittenden Central.
Thank you, Mr. President. The other body has gotten back to us on two bills, S5 and S37. So if we could, I'd like to begin with those proposals of amendment and then move back to the top of the calendar, skipping over 227.
With that in mind, we will now be taking up S5. We have a House proposal of amendment on S5. And for the report from the Committee on Natural Resources and Energy, the Senator from Addison.
Thank you, Mr. President. Again, I'm reporting on S5, an act relating to affordably meeting the mandated greenhouse gas reductions for the thermal sector through efficiency, weatherization measures, electrification, and decarbonization. The House has reviewed our work and has returned a series of, I'd characterize them as technical amendments to fine-tune the language we sent them. The full language appears on page 1904 of today's calendar, and I'd like to walk briefly through the sections and highlight changes. In section 1821, the intent section, acknowledging that there's an impact on public health, it's now made explicit as one of the elements to be considered when we look at the impacts of greenhouse gas emissions. In section 2, in the clean heat standard, there is language to make more specific the ability of an obligated party to use another method of fulfilling its clean heat requirements, clean heat standard requirements. In the section 8123 definitions, there is some additional language added to around customer with low income, specifying that it means a customer with household income of up to 60% of the area-wide or statewide median income, whichever is greater. Later in that same section, under thermal sector, where we talked before about fuels, and it makes it, there's new language to make it more clear. For instance, that thermal sector has the same meaning as residential, commercial, industrial fuel use sector as used in the Vermont Greenhouse Gas Inventory and Forecast, and does not include non-road diesel or any other transportation or other fuel use categorized elsewhere in the Vermont Greenhouse Gas Emissions Inventory and Forecast. In section 8124, which defines the clean heat standard compliance, in section A, which relates to required amounts, there is further specification about how the process can be paused in order to examine the market impacts of any particular program. And new language is inserted to indicate that good cause for pausing in the program. It will now include not only a shortage of clean heat credits, but market conditions as identified by the department's potential study conducted pursuant to section 8125 of the title. Moving ahead, in section B, annual registration, there's more details added about how the reporting shall be made available to the PUC when they're setting limits. For instance, exact number of gallons are now required in the report. In section D, related to the equitable distribution of clean heat measures, residents of manufactured homes are now added to the list of those to whom we want to ensure that the program delivers full service. We clarify in sub 5 that participation in other government-sponsored low-income and moderate-income weatherization programs shall not limit the ability of those households to participate in any program under this chapter. In other words, if you are in a weatherization program offered by the state, you are also eligible to participate in this program as well. As a matter of fact, it was always anticipated to be this way, and the two programs are designed to work hand in hand. In the next section, enforcement, sub F, there's some subtlety added to how the PUC will respond to an obligated party that has insufficient credits. It provides latitude to the commission to waive a non-compliance payment, and if it finds that that party has made a good faith effort to acquire the required amount of credits. And it also says that those credits, although they won't be penalized, are still owed to the program, and they can be satisfied in future years. In section 8, this is a new subsection related to light heat pricing. This was brought to us by the fuel dealers who pointed out that there's more than one pricing scheme that applies to the purchase of fuel, and this allows them to be treated fairly and accurately in how they are evaluated in terms of their fuel purchases. In the next section, we go on to appointments of the default delivery agent. There's a revision to the state, to the date. Commission shall designate first default delivery agent on or before June 1st of 2024. In sub D, use of the default delivery agent, we provide opportunities for obligated parties to meet their annual requirements through means other than through the default delivery agent, and a process that allows them to make application to the commission and have an approved process of their own. In section E, which relates to the budget, that the commission opens a proceeding on or before July 1, 2023, and at least every 3 years thereafter to establish the default delivery agent cost or costs, and then an insertion and the quantity of credits to be generated in a 3-year period. In sub A, there's a potential study that was in our report, the first of which shall be completed not later than September 1 of 24, and includes an assessment in order to evaluate the market conditions for delivery of clean heat measures within the state, including an assessment of workforce characteristics capable of meeting consumer demand and meeting the obligations of this program. Takes us to section 8126, rulemaking. In sub B, the requirements to adopt rules do not in any way impair the Commission's authority to issue orders or take other actions. Here, there's a further clarification of our original intent. The requirement to adopt rules and any requirements regarding the need for legislative approval before any part of the clean heat standard goes into effect do not impair the Commission's authority to issue rules or take other actions. In that same section, 8126 and 4 and 5, environmental justice provisions have been reconsidered, and we add specificity around providing helpful language assistance services on all public outreach materials. In the 8120 section, tradable clean heat credits, there's a list of eligible measures. You might recall that there were 11 as we voted them out. The House has added a 12th measure that qualifies for earning clean heat credits, and those are line extensions that connect facilities with thermal loads to the grid. In other words, poles and wires might be built out in order to bring a user of electricity online. And the case that was cited was there are maple sugaring operations that have been have switched to using electricity and needed a line extension in order to get on the grid. Moving forward to section H, review of consequences. This is more language that specifies that in considering the implementation of the program, that we set standards and consider the consequences of operation of the program. Those consequences now shall include environmental burdens as defined by 3 VSA 6002, which is our environmental justice section, public health, deforestation or forest degradation, conversion of grasslands, increased emission of criteria pollutants, which are a list of 6 pollutants that are regulated by the EPA, damage to watersheds, or the creation of a new methane to meet fuel demand. In 8128, Clean Heat Standard Technical Advisory Group, there is a new, in terms of the duties of this commission and what they shall consider, they shall now have, there's a new sub 8 in which they are required to calculate the savings associated with public health benefits due to clean heat measures. The connection there is that cleaner air is healthier air and is helpful in terms of public health. In sub B, the Clean Heat Standard Technical Advisory Group is now specified to include 15 members provided by the House in order to be able to assess the potential cost of operating such a panel, which in our version did not have any cap on the number of measures. In section 8129, the Clean Heat Standard Equity Advisory Group, in sub 6, who shall participate, and that includes now residents of manufactured homes. Again, we know there are many Vermonters in manufactured homes, and we want to make sure the program works well for them. In addition, there is a addition of more specificity for who the group will include, and now they've added a community action agency with expertise in low-income weatherization, a community action agency with expertise in serving residents of manufactured homes, as well as the Vermont Association of Area Agencies on Aging. There's a new sub-C. The Equity Advisory Group shall cease to exist when the initial clean heat standard rules are adopted. As folks may know, the Environmental Justice Bill established an Equity Advisory Group, a permanent group. Because this bill was drafted at a time where that was not yet confirmed, we created our own advisory group to ensure that those considerations were part of the development of the clean heat standard. But members of that panel recommended that, yes, they will be participate during sort of the setup phase of this, but by then the state's full environmental equity advisory group should be established, and it can play that role thereafter. In section 8131, I'll come back to this, but there are, I'll just read through now. Our version states that, as amended, notwithstanding any other provision of law to the contrary, the Commission shall not file proposed rules with the Secretary of State implementing the Clean Heat Standard without specific authorization enacted by the General Assembly. In section 582, there was some additional specificity added to the greenhouse gas inventory registry. There is a new section 5 related to the confidentiality of fuel tax returns. As the bill left the Senate, we had provisions that left the Department of Tax concerned about the confidentiality of records. The tax department worked with the House and came up with this new section 5 that relates to both the confidentiality of records generally, as well as those of the fuel tax, and then the public records law. In section 6, the Public Utility Commission implementation. As before, on or before August 31, 2023, the PUC shall commence a proceeding. And then in sub B, there is new language. We had permissive language. The Commission may hire a third-party consultant to help design and conduct public engagement. The House leaned into this a little harder, and they say that the Commission shall hire a third-party consultant with expertise in equity, justice, and diversity to design and conduct public engagement. Further, the Commission and the facilitator shall incorporate the guiding principles for a just transition into the public engagement process. Those guiding principles were a work product of the Climate Action Council and its report. In addition, there are additional reporting requirements, but the main thrust of their edits was to improve its accountability and perspective in terms of environmental justice. For instance, down in sub 2 of sub C, sub 2 within it, translation services are now required. And I'll go now to sub F, the final rules. On or before January 15, 2025, this is the provision, the section where we often referred to it as the check-back provision, which we can discuss further, but the House has added some additional specificity. There is an essential component of the rule and its potential operation. And the House has added that the final proposed rules shall contain the first set of annual required amounts for obligated parties. This is an essential component of any functional rule, as described in the bill. And the first set of annual requirements shall only be adopted through the rulemaking process established in this section, not through an order. So what I would point out that the annual requirements are an essential element of the program, and this essential element is only capable of being produced through a rule, not an order. The check-back reports continue as passed by the Senate. There is an addition in terms of a report, again, with a focus on equity. On or before January 15, 2025, the Equity Advisory Group shall report to the General Assembly and the group's findings from the review of issues under 30 VSA 8129A earlier in this bill. Section 7 relates to the Public Utility Commission and its service positions. There's our appropriations. They are unchanged, and the effective date is on passage, and that too remains unchanged. Senate Natural Resources and Energy reviewed the bill in detail and recommends to the full Senate that we concur on a 5-0-0 vote.
So the question is, shall the Senate concur with the House proposal of amendment? Are you ready for that question? Senator from Essex.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, when this bill left the Senate, we were assured by the senator from Danville that this was just a study, and that before any implementation could happen, that this bill would come back to the legislators in both houses, both chambers, with being assigned to the committees of jurisdiction, being passed out of those committees, voted on by both chambers, and then actually a new bill number assigned, and then being voted on with the governor having a chance to have a say on the matter. And we were assured that this was a study. This sure looks like implementation more than anything. In fact, on page 1906, section 8122, subsection D, it says the commission shall adopt rules and may issue orders to implement and enforce the Clean Heat Standard program. So my question, Mr. President, if I may inquire of the reporter of the bill, please.
The senator from Madison is interrogated as the reporter of the bill.
Mr. President, is this a study or is this implementation?
I wouldn't characterize it as either. I would characterize it as a plan developed under the guidance of the legislature to put us in a position that should we want to create and implement a Clean Heat Standard program, we would have a design to consider, and then that if we chose to implement it, we would then take the steps that you referred to briefly a moment ago. A new bill would be introduced by the next legislature, and it would take an enactment by the legislature in order to go to the implementation stage, which you're referring to. Enactment, just to be, it is an important and word to the legislature. That means that it has to be enacted on both the side of the House and the Senate, and then there's presentment of that action to the governor.
Mr. President, can you show us in the bill where that language is? Can you point us in that direction of where all of that is outlined?
So perhaps I can answer this concern about the check back by, if I may, Mr. President, we all are aware that this is a sensitive provision. It is what I would call an absolute firewall from having full implementation without the next legislature working. If I may, Mr. President, I would like to read from a legal memo developed by Legislative Counsel.
Without objection, you may.
I'm quoting, under S5, section 8131, section 8131 prohibits the PUC from filing rules with the Secretary of State, quote, implementing the Clean Heat Standard, end quote, without specific authorization enacted by the General Assembly. Enact means to make law, which requires the provisions of Chapter 2, Section 11 of the Vermont Constitution to be followed. This means a bill passed by both bodies and sent to the governor to either be signed, allowed to become law without signature, or vetoed and then overridden by a 2/3 majority of both bodies. The language in 8131 notwithstands the other sections in the bill that allow the PUC to adopt rules. This means that it overrides the other provisions so that the PUC cannot adopt rules without the legislative authorization being enacted. The House added language in S5 that specifies that the rules proposed to the General Assembly must include the establishment of the annual emission reduction requirements, and those requirements shall not be in any orders. This is the primary component of the clean heat standard. Without it, the other parts of the bill would not be able to be used. Without the annual required amount approved, the only other part of the Clean Heat Standard Program that can be enforced against the obligated parties is the requirement of fuel sellers to register the PUC.
Mr. President, I appreciate that, but is that language in this right here, what we're voting on today? Is that language specifically in here, other than just an email that received from the source that you read it from?
That specific language is not in this bill. I just read a memo from Legislative Counsel analyzing what's in the bill. But the provision that you're referring to in terms of how things will, quote unquote, work is specified in, let me get the section number. It's
That's the section.
Section 6, Public Utility Commission, sub F, final rules. So it says that the final rules, I'll read it.
Excuse me, Mr. President, what page are we referring to, Mr. President?
If I may direct the senators to help clarify, in today's calendar on page 1923, about halfway down is section 8131, which I believe was referenced in the memo from Legislative Counsel.
Thank you, Mr. President. As stated, page 1923, 8131.
Mr. President, I think we had appropriated 1.7 million or thereabouts of dollars to do the study that we have. Are we appropriating any other dollars into implementation? I believe that when it left here, it was just a study. We were going to study this, and then if it was something that the General Assembly, through all the provisions that we've outlined, thought we'd all get a vote on it all the way through. Are we spending, are we allocating, is this actually appropriating more monies to standing the program up before the study? I thought Mr. President, that the idea of the study is to make sure that we could set this program up correctly without spending taxpayer dollars on something we don't even know yet. If it's truly a study, we don't even know yet, Mr. President, to whether we're even going to do this. Are we appropriating more dollars to implement a program that we're supposed to study, and we don't even know yet whether we're going to do the program yet because we don't have the results of the study back?
If I just want to make sure I understand the question. When the senator asks if we are appropriating more money, more relative to what? The bill as passed by the Senate earlier this session?
Yes, that is correct, Mr. President. We appropriated money from the Senate to do a study to see if there was something we could implement. It just seems like now we're implementing, and instead of doing a study. And I'm just wondering if we're actually doing a study or we're just implementing a program, and have more dollars been appropriated to do implementation versus a study?
No. In section 7, you'll see the appropriations are unchanged.
So Mr. President, so all this implementation is just being done. We're just doing it. It's not costing the state any money. We're doing that. And we're not taking study dollars to do implementation.
No.
Mr. President, that's a good deal. I guess we were very much assured by, we're all respected in this, in the Senate. I get that. You know, we all deserve that respect. And I just have a lot of respect for the senator from Danville who assured us that this was a study, it wasn't implementation, that it was an idea that we were going to look at, and we were going to take the results of that study, and then we were going to build the program based on that study. And it looks like we've actually put the cart before the horse, and we're doing implementation, and oh, by the way, we're going to do a study, Mr. President. And I don't think that was what we had voted on when it left the Senate chamber. But thank you, Mr. President.
Before I call on our next speaker, I'd just like to remind the Senate that if an inquiry is concluded, if one could thank the person one is inquiring so that they may...
I apologize. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator. I do have the senator from Bennington who's had their hand up. Senator Sears.
Thank you, Mr. President. May I inquire the reporter of the bill?
The senator from Addison is interrogated as the reporter of the bill.
Mr. President, it's a rather simple question. In section 8131, as it passed the Senate, this I believe is the check back provision. It read, notwithstanding any other provisional law to the contrary, the commission shall not file proposed rules with the Secretary of State or issue any orders implementing the clean heat standard without specific authorization enacted by the General Assembly. Mr. President, as I read the changes from the other body, they struck the words or issue any orders. And I have no idea if that allows the commission to begin issuing orders implementing the clean heat standard without legislative authority.
It does not. Orders are used procedurally by the PUC in order to complete the preparation work that some people have been calling a study. Other people refer to it as a plan. So, for instance, it is through an order that they will create the registry for obligated parties. But the key element that I think I want to come back to again is that an essential and core component of the rule itself is the House made it more explicit and said that component cannot be created through order, and it must be issued as a rule. We had constrained the presentation of any rule from being filed with the Secretary of State unless there was an act of the next legislature. That remains.
Mr. President, I believe some would argue that this has weakened the check back provision of the Senate version of the bill, and that orders could be a separate, as I look at other sections, could end up implementing parts of the clean heat standard. That's the real fear here. I heard what the senator said, but I am concerned about striking those 4 words.
If you would like me to respond to that, or if there's a question.
Mr. President, that was a question.
Okay. So I would point us all to sub 5 in that same section, that the final proposed rules shall contain the first annual required amounts for obligated parties as described in 30 VSA 8124A1, so earlier in the bill. The first set of annual required amounts shall only be adopted through the rulemaking process established in the section, not through an order. I think if I were to make an analogy, it would be as though you could build a car, but you could not install the engine or transmission. And these essential components that are referred to in sub 5 are essential, to the operation of the bill. So through order, they do sort of the housekeeping that would be necessary to operate a clean heat standard program, but they cannot implement a clean heat standard program.
Thank you, Mr. President. In my years in the Senate, I've always tried to support the clean positions and understand them. This is certainly a leap of faith more than I'm used to. But I appreciate the discourse, and thank you, Mr. President.
Does the senator from Caledonia still wish to speak? You all set?
Mr. President.
Oh, sorry. Senator from Orleans.
Yes, may I inquire of the reporter, please?
The senator from Addison is interrogated as a reporter.
Could the, thank you, Mr. President. Could the reporter turn to page 1915 under 8126 and read A and explain it, what that means? So, sorry, I'm just catching up. 8126 is a section on rulemaking. The commission shall adopt rules and may issue orders to implement and enforce the Clean Heat Standard Program. So Mr. President, could the reporter tell me? I just heard him say that they couldn't do any of this stuff, and yet he just read A, and the way I interpreted it is it's giving them permission to do rules and issue orders to implement and enforce. So could you explain where we are? Because we're, in one hand, we're told, well, they can't do anything until they come back and get permission. And I read A under 8126 as they have permission to do it. So do they have permission or don't they have permission to do it?
So I thank the senator for the question, and it'll help us to remember that until only days prior to this bill coming to the Senate floor the first time, we wrote a bill that fully implemented the program. There were concerns about whether or not the multiple reports, there are reports from the Department of Public Service, there are reports from the PUC, and there's an economic impact study that comes with the rule itself. There were 4 reports, they are still coming, but there was concern as to whether or not we would see the full costs of benefits of the program adequately through those reports prior to implementation. The so-called check back provision was then added, and it includes notwithstanding. So the bill is written in order to fully implement the program. Then we, notwithstand the very language you're referring to, subsequently in the bill, in order to create that absolute hard stop, the rule cannot be presented without further action of the next legislature. So that's why it may be a little confusing, but we create a full-fledged program, then we add our own notwithstanding provision to say it may not proceed all the way to implementation without action of the next legislature.
So, Mr. President, why can't we strike that language in A? And then there isn't any misinterpretation whether you can do it or you can't do it, because later on you've got the section in there that says you can't move forward. So why don't we strike A under 8126 so there's no confusion, because us people up north kind of read things for what they say, and this says both things. You can do the rules and move forward to implement, and then later on in the bill it says, so why have the confusion? Why don't we delete A, and so there is no confusion?
The reason not to delete A is that it includes, for instance, the ability to implement orders. As I was saying earlier, the PUC's ability to construct a sort of the administrative back end of such a program requires them to use orders. For instance, in order to create the registry of those who are selling fossil fuels in the state of Vermont. Those are the people who will become obligated parties should the program go on to implementation. If we were to strike this section, they'd have no ability to sort of do the what I've been referring to as the planning phase that operates for the next 2 years. So again, this enables them to do all the work they need to do, but creates a firewall between completion of that work through implementation.
I want to thank the member from Addison. Mr. President, I still think this is a very confusing statement to have in there I don't see why, if they want to do their work, they couldn't do their work anyways. But this actually says that they shall adopt rules and may issue orders. And I just think that that's really not a check back on when it says that. So thank you, Mr. President.
Senator from Franklin.
Thank you, Mr. President. I will not repeat the comments that I made when this bill was first before us about its concerns, but I would like to leverage statements from the Senator from Orleans regarding Section 8126 rulemaking, and I would ask to interrogate the reporter of the bill for a moment, if possible.
Senator from Madison is interrogated as a reporter of the bill.
Thank you, Mr. President. I understand from the previous discussion that rules will not be implemented until the legislature opines on it. However, I take 8126B on page 1915 that goes further. It says the requirement to adopt rules and requirements regarding the need for legislative approval before any part of the Clean Heat Standard goes into effect do not in any way impair the Commission's authority to issue orders or take any other actions, both before and after, and underline the word after, final rules take effect to implement and enforce the Clean Heat Standard. What does that mean, Mr. President?
This section, so again, 8126, the rulemaking section, specifies, I'll repeat what I was saying to the Senator from Orleans. The rule as the bill and program as designed was designed to, in anticipation of its implementation. On the home stretch, we had questions about the affordability of it, which has been a paramount concern of the designers of the program for the 3 years that it's been in development. Therefore, the language here is designed to fully facilitate the operation of a complete program. That's why people are seeing language that seems perhaps to them overly permissive. But the reality is, at the end of the bill, we use the word notwithstanding, and it refers to the entire bill that we are looking at. So that's why you see what, it might appear as a conflict, but it is actually because a fully fledged program needs to have the ability to write rules and orders in order to be fully operative. However, we don't let the program become implemented, and we ensure that it does not through the check back provision we've been discussing.
I thank the reporter. Mr. President, I'm still concerned about the specific language in the bill because although there is the notwithstanding provision in Section 8131 to not file proposed rules with the Secretary of State, there is still clearly in Section 8126B the ability of the Commission to issue orders or take any other actions, including actions after final rules take effect, to implement and enforce, both before and after. That is horribly confusing and appears to go contrary to the notwithstanding piece. The notwithstanding piece deals with rules, but orders and any other actions are far beyond that. And the implication here is that this is something that is on a fast track. It's going to go regardless of what happens, but the check back and any legislative involvement in this is purely periphery and not being taken seriously. Thank you, Mr. President.
Senator from Washington.
Thank you, Mr. President. I would just like to add a little bit here. I would say that this program is not being fast-tracked because we have built in this check-back provision. Section 8131, which is about rulemaking authority, since it notwithstands the entire bill, it means that anything prior, this supersedes anything else in the bill, and it needs to send any of those rules in order for them to be enacted or to move forward. They must be specifically approved by the legislature in bill form. And so I think we can say that there is no confusion. I don't think that there's any reason for confusion here because the rules are going to be put on pause until the legislature specifically says that we can move forward. And so the program will not be implemented unless the legislature acts saying that it can move forward. Thank you.
Senator from Caledonia.
Thank you, Mr. President. I've been referenced, and obviously your Appropriations Committee played a key role in the check back language. I think it was because of that language, in fact, people felt comfortable supporting the bill. It is very confusing because, in fact, given my druthers, I would have started out with the potential study, which really would have been the foundational work to create a program. Instead, we're building off legislation that was passed a couple of years ago, and it started in the other body. And it really created the program almost in advance of the analytical and the necessary work that a potential study, in fact, would undertake. So we have that bill that we've been sort of working from that I think got out of sequence in terms of what needed to be done. So it is very confusing because it really got into the specifics of what that program would look like. In some ways, this, in my mind, I don't mean to say it's going to end up in the same way, but certainly we had with a single payer a lot of effort, and upon additional information, analytical work, we changed and modified the way that we move forward. So I have been very concerned that in no way would any of this language circumvent our intent to have a check back, and nothing moves forward without the specific enactment of the full General Assembly. I have been assured by legal counsel enactment means we have to pass a law. I realize there's tremendous disjuncture here in the language if you look at one section versus another, but if you look at the final language that came out of your Senate Appropriations Committee, I believe, and I have been assured, that in no way has our intent been eroded. It's just the problem when you look at one section in isolation with the other. So I'm with a senator from Bennington who said maybe it's a leap of faith, but I have to have confidence that in fact our legal counsel is advising us correctly that in fact what we are agreeing to here is allowing the planning and the conceptual work and design to move forward so that we have a better understanding of exactly what this concept would look like, what implementation would mean, what the cost would be, the impact, the feasibility. And so it's with the confidence that our legal counsel, legislative counsel, and numerous attorneys in Ledge Council have looked at this language that has assured me that nothing has changed and that our intent that came from appropriations with this amendment is still intact. And I wish I could think of a different word than trumps all, but it does by its notwithstanding. So I have struggled with it. I've received emails that have said somehow we are circumventing, we're creating a back door. You're not going to get, they can move ahead without the action of the General Assembly. And I have been assured that this, in fact, is not the case, and that nothing gets implemented until January 20 of 25. The legislature has the information that it needs to feel comfortable and able to answer the key questions that have troubled us all. So I just want to state, if in fact my understanding of what we've done and the enactment is not correct, then I would be very, very distressed. But I've been assured that, in fact, it is very much intact. Thank you, Mr. President.
Senator from Chittenden Central.
Thank you, Mr. President. I was also struck by the phrase fast-tracked, because I understand, I think, where the senator from Franklin drew the phrase, but if you think about it, this bill will go through the entire legislative process. The governor has indicated that he would plan to veto it, at which point we will be having this discussion again at an override session. And we will go through the entire exercise one more time. If that's the case, this will go into law, but what it means by going into law is that a plan will be created that will then come back to us to go through the entire process again, that may be vetoed, and then in order for anything to happen, there will have to be a second override. So the idea that this is fast-tracked is completely reverse. It's to think up is down. The climate has changed, and it's changed in a drastic, horrible way. That's what this bill is all about. So we're setting up a system where it will take us 5 years to do anything about it. I don't see another way to move this through the chamber without the check back, so I have been a big proponent of it. But let's not kid ourselves. The check back delays things by years. So, like the senator who just spoke from Caledonia, I trust Ledge Council. Ledge Council assures me that the check back is not weakened in any way, but you will hear from opponents of the bill that it has been, because it was the one thing that allowed the bill to move forward. So do not believe that we are fast tracking. We are not. Do not believe that we are weakening the check back. We are not. But if Ledge Council 2 weeks from now decides that we are weakening the check back, we are still going to have an override session where we will have the deja vu of this discussion one more time. So I would encourage the body to trust Ledge Council and the Committee of Jurisdiction, who have done fantastic work, and that we move forward with this very necessary piece of legislation. Thank you, Mr. President.
Question is, shall the Senate concur with the House proposal of amendment? Are you ready for that question?
Roll call.
Senator from Franklin has requested a roll call. Are you ready for the question? If so, the Secretary shall commence to call the roll.
Senator Bray.
Yes.
Senator Baruch.
Yes.
Senator Brock.
No.
Senator Campion.
Yes.
Senator Chittenden.
Yes.
Senator Clarkson.
Yes.
Senator Collmore.
No.
Senator Cummings.
Yes.
Senator Gulick.
Yes.
Senator Hardy.
Yes.
Senator Harrison.
Yes.
Senator Hashim.
Yes.
Senator Ingalls.
No.
Senator Kitchell.
Yes.
Senator Lyons.
Yes.
Senator McDonald.
Yes.
Senator Mazza.
No.
Senator McCormick.
Yes.
Senator Norris.
No.
Senator Pershler.
Yes.
Senator Ron Hinsdale.
Yes.
Senator Sears.
Yes.
Senator Starr.
No.
Senator Bihovsky.
Yes.
Senator Watson.
Yes.
Senator Weeks.
No.
Senator Westman.
No.
Senator White.
Yes.
Senator Williams.
No.
Senator Renner.
No.
Please listen to the results of your vote. Those voting yea, 20. Those voting nay, 10. And you have concurred with the House proposal amendment on S5. We now have up for consideration S37. S37 was passed by the Senate and referred to the House. The House has passed the bill with amendment, and the bill is now on the Senate agenda. The question is, and I will refer to the Senator in a moment, the pending question will be, shall the Senate concur with the House proposal amendment? For the report from the Committee on Health and Welfare, the Senator from Chittenden, Senator Lyons.
Thank you, Mr. President. First, I will say that the committee supports our concurrence with the
House proposal of amendment that you can find on page 1928 of today's calendar. I will briefly go through the changes. Principally, they are changes in some definitions, and those definitions are consistent with the definitions that we looked at in H89 that was reported on the bill. And remembering that this bill is an act relating to access to legally protected healthcare activity and regulation of healthcare providers. So, Mr. President, we also looked at, beside definitions, some language clarifications, and so I will go through as expeditiously as possible and try to cite the pages on which changes have been made. So on page 1928, the gender affirming healthcare services now has a phrase including medications. On page 1929, there is again reproductive healthcare services with the inclusion of medication. And then the definitions that we looked at earlier on H89 have been made consistent within S37 on reproductive healthcare services. I'll skip a little. On page 1933, in the area of professional regulation and unprofessional conduct, some contextual language has been added from current statute, and then the addition of two conditions relating to unprofessional conduct, indicating that if a practitioner willfully provides inaccurate health or medical information to a patient, including purposeful misrepresentation of a patient's health status. That's number 7. And number 29, under unprofessional conduct, providing or claiming to provide services or medications that are purported to reverse effects of medication abortion. Then there's also some clarification of language on the same page, 1933, that clarifies that we're talking about a provider who is certified, registered, or licensed in Vermont. That language was not included earlier. And then language in FB, that it's clear that the criminal or civil or disciplinary action in another state against the healthcare provider, based solely on the healthcare provider's participation and provision of legally protected healthcare activity is protected. Then definitions on page 1933 for healthcare provider and healthcare services are added. These are definitions that are currently in statute, but now are being spelled out to offer clarity to this portion of our state laws. And then similarly on page 1934, we are clarifying that the provider listed in D1 is certified, registered, or licensed in Vermont. And then similar language regarding another state. And then on page 1934, these are healthcare providers within the Office of Professional Regulation. The definitions are added here as well. These are also definitions currently in our statute, but being added for clarity. On page 1935, section 8, we look at pregnancy centers, and rather than the title Pregnancy Services Center Fraud, the title's been changed to Pregnancy Services Centers. Seems a lot more objective. And then on page 1935, there's a word that's struck out and then a word change in the middle of number 2 on that page. Rather than many limited service pregnancy centers, we discussed some limited service pregnancy centers. On pages 1935 and 36, some language change under number 4 to offer that choices are essential to one's sense of personal agency and autonomy. That's some change, just expansion of the thought that we had in the bill as we sent it over to the House.
page 1937. Some language has been struck. You don't see the language that's struck, but it was struck from the bill. And then the language was changed relating to unfair and unprofessional conduct. And on pages 1937 and 38, the language for limited service pregnancy centers is elaborated healthcare providers licensed under Title 26. That's the Office of Professional Regulation, so includes folks like nurses and counselors who are employed by or contracted to provide services for or on behalf of or volunteer to provide services at limited service pregnancy centers shall be responsible for conducting and providing healthcare services, information, and counseling at the center. And then failure of a healthcare professional licensed under Title 26 of the Vermont statutes annotated to conduct or to ensure that healthcare services, information, and counseling at the limited service pregnancy services center are conducted in accordance with state law and professional standards of practice may constitute unprofessional conduct. So this is clarification for those professionals working at those centers. Continuing on page 1938, the title of what was in the bill was Agency of Human Services Green Mountain Care Board Access to Reproductive Health Care and Gender Affirming Care. That's been changed. I believe that was in session law. Now we're adding it into the work of the Green Mountain Care Board on a regular basis for their health resource allocation plan. So on 1938, there 9405 little b, there is some contextual language from current statute, and then the addition on page 1938, number 4, which will now have the board include reproductive health care services and gender affirming health care services in their health resources allocation plan. 9A on page 1938 is the health assessment of community profiles. There is work going on at this time by our Agency of Human Services and others to look at community health profiles, and what will now be included will be to work with the LGBTQ community and others to identify and explore barriers related to equitable access to gender-affirming healthcare services. That is on page 1939. Section 10, the date for the report back from our compact representative is changed from November 1st, 2024 to 2025. Simply because we do have a number of compacts that potentially will be in statute by that time in operation, and this will allow for greater time for reporting back about the work that we've asked our compact representatives to do in the context of this bill. On page 1939, we have clarified language relating to licensed, certified, or registered folks, professionals, and rather than calling them applicants or applicants when they are working in a compact, they are professionals. On page 1940, we've also increased, we've added, the clarity has been added. We didn't, the House did, clarity on what the work of the compact implementation will be and what our Vermont representatives will influence, including directives or rules or bylaws. On Section 11A on page 1941 relates to emergency contraception and vending machines, and there is a notwithstanding provision that will allow for this to go forward within the planning by the Department of Health and others. On what you don't see on page 1942 is a number 4 has been deleted and a new number 4 added. Medication abortion, because it's covered elsewhere in the bill and in our definitions of reproductive health care. Similarly, that is continues into number 4, reproductive health care services. And then on page 1942, there's one word that's been struck, On number 6, the word, it used to be the referral, and now number 6 reads the information. Then on page 1943, telehealth has been added so that in an investigatory procedure, when one is being investigated for appropriate professional activity and conduct, telehealth will be included, and that would, so on page 1944, number 5, language been added that when an investigation takes place is whether or not a person is licensed, certified, or registered to practice as a healthcare professional in the state, that their telehealth information, telehealth work can be utilized in that investigation. And that also adheres to any disclosure to the Department of Health or the Vermont Department of Aging, Independent Living, for other related field investigations. Section 15, page 1944, under some of the effective dates, the word under number 10, in the middle of that paragraph, it says, in parentheses, reports and analyses have been added because there's some analytic information that's been requested. So those are a lot of smaller changes, but there are also some fairly important changes that make the bill consistent with H89, and the work that is being done in the other body at this time will be consistent with this bill as it goes forward. So your Senate Health and Welfare Committee asks that we concur with the proposal as it has come to us from the House. Thank you, Mr. President.
The question is, shall the Senate concur with the House proposal of amendment? Are you ready for that question? If so, all those in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
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 Those opposed indicate by saying nay.
Nay.
The ayes appear to have it. The ayes do have it, and you have concurred with the House proposal of amendment on S37. We now have up for consideration H178. Third reading of 178 was ordered. Are there any amendments before third reading? Seeing none, please listen to the third reading of the bill.
H178, an act relating to commissioning Department of Corrections personnel as notaries public.
Now you've heard the third reading of the bill. The question is, shall the bill pass? Are you ready for that question? If so, all those in favor? All those in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed indicate by saying nay. The ayes have it, and you have passed H178. We now have up for consideration H494. Third reading was ordered. It's my understanding that there are amendments to be offered. The first is in the calendar on page 1864. And for the report of that amendment, the senator from Caledonia, Senator Kitchell.
Thank you, Mr. President. This is a technical amendment. It is changing a figure and including global commitment funds adjustment of $250,000. It's simply a matter of using global commitment to support barge grants, which are balanced and restorative justice grants. So once again, it's just a matter of correcting the figures, and we hope this body will concur.
So the question is, shall the Senate amend the bill as offered by the senator from Caledonia and others? Are you ready for that question? If so, all those in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed indicate by saying nay. The ayes have it, and you have amended the bill as offered by the senator from Caledonia and others. It's my understanding there's an amendment from the senator from Chittenden Southeast, Senator Chittenden, that will be handed out on your desks shortly. Senator from Chittenden Southeast.
Thank you, Mr. President. I really love bringing forward amendments on third reading. So what I have for you all today is a very short amendment. And to orient you, if you do have today's Journal of the Senate, which has the H494 in totality from second reading, it's on page 814, the section that would put in context this very short one-line amendment that is being passed out now. So again, that was page 814 of today's Journal. It is in section E131.2. This has to do with the School Construction Aid Task Force. I just also want to use this opportunity, if I may, Mr. President, to thank the Senate Education Committee for this very important work. School construction is something that we need to look at at a state, and I'm very excited about what is in this budget bill on this topic. The reason why I'm here standing before you with this short amendment is constituents over the past 5 days have reached out to me seeing this task force composition in the budget, and they just saw an opportunity for one additional important voice around the table. And who's around the table is important. And so what this amendment adds is just one additional person with expertise in school energy efficiency and energy performance contracting, who shall be appointed by the governor to this already 15-member task force on school construction aid. I did bring this before Senate Education, and I believe they'll speak to the committee's point of view on this momentarily. But this is just an important thing to keep in mind as we look at school construction aid solutions to ensure that we're considering energy performance opportunities for retrofits, for existing previous old construction age improvements, and so on. And that's what this slight amendment would do if approved by the body. Thank you, Mr. President.
Senator from Caledonia.
Thank you, Mr. President. The Senate Appropriations Committee reviewed this amendment, and we view it as a friendly amendment. We had originally hoped to reduce the number of legislators from 4 to 2, but that was not viewed as friendly by our Education Committee, so we concur with the amendment as it's being presented. Thank you.
Question is, shall the bill be further amended as offered by the senator from Chittenden Southeast? Are you ready for the question? If so, all those in favor, please indicate by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed indicate by saying nay. The ayes have it, and you have further amended the bill as offered by the senator from Chittenden Southeast. My understanding that there is a handout happening now to be offered with an amendment by Senator from Chittenden Central, Senator Baruth.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'll wait just a moment for people to receive the handout. So, Mr. President, I regard this as a technical amendment as well. Senators who have been here a while may remember that we have a prevailing wage statute for construction projects that come out of the capital bill, and it assures a prevailing wage, has some parameters for how that's determined, and it has a connection specifically to things that are funded 50% or more in the capital bill. This time around, we put some of the capital bill spending in the big bill. And as such, it escapes that statute, which is directed at spending from the capital bill. So 29 VSA 161 says that prevailing wage is in force if you're funding with the capital bill, but for convenience, we moved some things into the big bill. So this simply says that these things that were moved into the big bill will still be covered by that prevailing wage statute. Thank you, Mr. President.
Senator from Caledonia.
Your Appropriations Committee reviewed this proposed amendment, and we realize this is something new when we're using most bonded as well as the capital fund for capital projects. And this simply aligns and uses the same language regardless of the funding source. And so we do support this amendment as presented. Thank you.
The question is, shall the bill be further amended as offered by the senator from Chittenden Central? Are you ready for the question? If so, all those in favor, please indicate by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed indicate by saying nay. The ayes have it, and you have further amended the bill as offered by the senator from Chittenden. It's my understanding that the senator from Windham has an amendment that will be being offered. Senator from Windham.
Thank you, Mr. President. Today I'm offering an amendment to Section B 1100, Section O, Subsection 4 of H 494. This is the Hotel Voucher and General Assistance Program. Before I go further, I do just want to emphasize that I greatly appreciate and respect the significant amount of work that the Appropriations Committee has undertaken for this budget. With that being said, the goal of this amendment is twofold. One is to continue the general assistance program for prioritized people by adding 20 million to B 1100 for a total of 38 million. The second part of this amendment is to repeal the remote worker incentive program and use that money to help fund the general assistance program. I understand that the general assistance program must eventually come to an end, and I do agree with that, but I hold concerns about the timing. I do see that this budget allocates a substantial investment in creating more support services and transitional housing for the same folks who would have to exit the hotels within a few months. And I'm grateful that this budget includes those investments. However, these services and the housing will take time to implement and build. In the interim time, I am worried that causing a portion of folks to leave their hotels will have a negative impact on our communities. Based on what I've seen and my own experiences, I'm certain that for the people who already exist on the outer reaches of our socioeconomic circles, losing access to their already tenuous housing situations will make things far more challenging for both those individuals and surrounding communities. I know that in my district, there is a heightened concern about what will happen when there's a sudden increase in the homeless population in just a few months. Now, I know that Senate Appropriations spent a considerable amount of time deliberating this amendment, for which I'm grateful. And over the last 2 days or so, as I've been working on this, I have heard numbers ranging from 20 million to 72 million. And I erred on the side of caution and went with the 20 million. I do want to emphasize that there's no intention for me to try to create a deficit or raise taxes with this amendment. Rather, my goal was to have a reconsideration of the one-time funds to support this program. And again, I want to thank the committee for its hard work on the underlying budget, which I will be supporting, but I do ask the Senate to consider the changes in this amendment that would extend the hotel voucher program and also repeal the remote worker program. And Mr. President, I know there are a lot of feelings on both the hotel program and the remote worker program, which are two very different things. And so I would like to ask that we divide the amendment and take separate votes on sections 1 and 2, and then sections 3 and 4. Voting on 1 and 2 would allocate that additional 20 million, and sections 3 and 4 would repeal the remote worker incentive program and send $1 million to the voucher program. Thank you.
Senator from Caledonia.
Thank you, Mr. President. Your Senate Appropriations Committee spent quite a bit of time again, looking at the way in which we have allocated funding for housing needs. This is something that, in fact, we first visited in the BAA, and we have in place a phase down of the motel program, and that would be non-vulnerable populations. The benefit would cease the end of May, and then for the balance, the end of June. We're talking about a program that got created when we had COVID. It was a public health response, and the benefit was funded with federal dollars. That's what has permitted us to spend nearly $200 million in buying or paying for motel rooms. We are very cognizant of the impact that a shutdown of the program and a return to our general assistance program entails. And if you look at the sheet that we provided on housing, I hope it shows how we have attempted to balance those competing needs, because every dollar for a motel room is a dollar you don't have to build permanent ongoing housing and address our housing capacity. So on this sheet of paper, you will see that in the budget adjustment, in emergency housing, we had 18.3, and then in 24, we have a total of 26.4 million. We moved 7.5 million into the base of general assistance, which is our emergency assistance program that has been in place. Actually, it's been a replacement from the old overseer of the poor system. And I've been around long enough to know and experience when that happened. And so we felt that that program that had no funding for emergency housing, we agreed with the House to put 7.5 million there. And then we are attempting to do the support services that are necessary, as well as to build greater capacity. So in the budget, as we have proposed it, if you go down into the affordable housing development, We are in the BAA, just a couple months ago, we put in a total of $27.5 million into housing. Out of that, 2.5 was directed specifically to building emergency housing. We also have $50 million in the budget that we are debating today. We had allocated $10 million of that specifically to go for more development of housing and addressing the capacity issue, actually continuing what we've have been doing around conversion of motels, which Oregon has done. As I mentioned, they've converted 19 motels. We've converted 13 to date. But also recognizing that it's going to take a mixed strategy. So there might be an opportunity for manufactured housing for some individuals, as well as the development of permanent affordable housing. There's also money for the conversion and continued work on the Vermont Housing Improvement, which really is taking existing housing stock and getting it rehabbed so that it is up to code and can be rented. What we realize is that housing is just part of this as well. We also have $30,000 to deal for housing vouchers for individuals who are in recovery that would be administered through our recovery centers, of which we have also increased just about double their funding so that they have greater capacity to serve this population. We also included in the budget an increase of $200,000 to our youth service bureaus that serve so many of our young adults. And then the other area where there's a significant increase, and hopefully this will have an impact, and that is a 79% increase in our residential care homes and the payments that they receive that would serve people, many of whom we are hearing have significant health problems or in fact mobility and might be confined to wheelchairs. It is, after much deliberation, first of all, the funding that would revert back from the remote worker would be about, at most, $3 million. We had the $1 million one time plus what's still available from ARPA. Based on experience to date and our best estimates from Legislative Council is that by adding only $20 million, if we had it, we would still be operating at a deficit of $30 million. As you know, it has been our principle, although it's not constitutionally required, we don't pass a budget that's not balanced, and in fact would have a deficit. So if we were to pass and continue this benefit at the level that it has been historically, it would require probably around $50 million. And it would get us through March, and the question then is, where would we be in March? That we are not here today. Now, we recognize that some more units will be coming online, and that will help. We also know, and we've taken testimony from the Agency of Human Services, that they understand the gravity of this situation and the shutdown of the program, and it is going to place a high burden on them to work with their community partners, which we've also been funding, to work with every individual to provide the housing that is necessary. It is something that there's concern as to what will happen July 1st. We recognize that concern. I think we have felt that we have put state government on notice in terms of the response that they need to have in place. But at this point, we cannot support an expansion of or continuation of benefits that we cannot fund. We don't have any other area that we would recommend redirecting from our one-time list, which we've passed out. And so your Appropriations Committee, after much discussion today, as well as previously, is recommending that we not support this amendment. Thank you.
I'm going to state the amendment clearly because there was a division request by the proposer of the amendment. Therefore, the question now is, shall the bill be amended as offered by the senators from Windham and Chittenden Central as found on the handout in the first and second instances only? Excuse me for a moment. It's my understanding that for clarity, we might take a very brief recess to get the question stated properly. We'll take a brief recess till the fall of the gavel. Senate will please come to order. Senator from Windham, might you please clarify the request on the division?
Thank you, Mr. President. I will clarify that. I would actually request a division on section 1 on its own, and then sections 2, 3, and 4 on their own.
Just to clarify, we'll take a vote on section 1, and then we would take a vote on sections 2, 3, and 4 together as a second vote. You're not asking for all 4 to be individual.
Correct, just 2.
Thank you. The question is, shall the bill be further amended as offered by the senator from Windham and Chittenden Central in the first instance only? Are you ready for that question? Senator from Chittenden Southeast.
Thank you, Mr. President. I have pulled up the amendment, and I would say I'm struggling a little bit to understand if that encompasses the removal of the appropriation for the remote workers program. But regardless of that, I suppose I will just say now, given that that's part of the overall proposal of amendment, that while it's certainly fully under the jurisdiction of the Appropriations Committee, our Economic Development, Housing, and General Affairs Committee never had the opportunity to discuss the removal of that program, which is our jurisdiction. I might have my own personal feelings about it. They might differ from my colleague, the senator from Windsor County, who stewarded the workforce development bill from our committee's perspective, but it would have been nice probably just to have the opportunity to know that that this was going to be on the table. And I will say, as chair also of the Housing Committee, I think our committee certainly is not our jurisdiction to look at general assistance. That falls under your Committee on Health and Welfare. But it is concerning to us that this program costs $170 a night on average per motel room. That's over $5,000 a month to spend on a motel room that doesn't get someone further towards sustainable long-term housing. I can think of a lot of other ways we can spend that money for supportive housing. And so by my calculation, the $3 million in the remote worker program divided by $170 divided by approximately 2,000 people in the program would buy an additional 8 nights per person. So I just want to help us all understand the magnitude of the cost of this program versus longer term housing support and opportunities for Vermonters. And so with that, wherever we are in the amendment, especially given the concern about our committee not being consulted, I would be voting no.
Senator from Caledonia.
May I have a clarification? Depending on the vote that we take first, is the desire, I gather, still to revisit the funding for the and eliminating the remote worker program? It seems like it was used as a funding source to support the program expansion or continuation. So I see, I'm just wondering if the first vote would determine a need to vote on the second for the funding source, or is it just on the merits of the program entirely?
Senator, might I clarify, are you wishing to interrogate the proposer of the amendment, or are you asking for clarity with respect to the order of procedure from the chair?
I guess, of order, which would be.
So with the current proposal is to vote on the first instance only. I cannot speak as to whether or not the second, third, and fourth instances would or would not be withdrawn, depending the outcome. But the current vote is with respect to the first instance only. Senator from Windsor.
Thank you. I'd like to follow up on the chair of Senate Economic Development, Housing, and General Affairs. We were going to speak to the second vote of our committee. We did not have a chance to review this. I'd just like to clarify this is a $20 million discussion here, and the remote worker in the current budget has been cut down to $1 million. We have committed the funds, as far as I understand it, and it's not a remote worker program. It is the new relocation worker program, which it has been now for 2 years. And I would remind everybody, we need as many tools in our toolbox to fill the 20,000 jobs we have available in this state. We need more taxpayers to pay for our big heart. And this is a very modest program. There is no way that it's going to possibly manage financing the $20 million price tag that's being asked to finance here in this bill. I would encourage, I understand that my colleague, the senator from Franklin, will speak to this when we have an opportunity, but I just would like to clarify that as far as I understand, there's no money left in the new relocation worker program. So to end it, there's nothing there for them to finance the $20 million, and there's only $1 million in the current budget for remote workers. Thank you, Mr. President.
If I may clarify before I call on the next, the proposer of the amendment, the question is, shall the bill be further amended as offered in the first instance only? That is the question that we are discussing at the moment. Senator from Wyndham.
Thank you, Mr. President. So math was never my strong suit, but I do recognize that 1 million will not fund the entirety of the 20 million. And I, myself and the senator from Chittenden Central, we did spend time trying to go through the one-time funding to try to find money where we could pull to fully fund the 20 million. Really, this was a request to take a step back for the Appropriations Committee to take some more time to see where we could find the remainder of that money. So I do understand the concern there. I also do want to state that it was a lack of foresight on my part that this did not go through the Economic Development Committee. My thought was that it would go through the Appropriations Committee entirely because it was the budget. So my apologies to the senator from Chittenden.
Senator from Caledonia.
Thank you, Mr. President. I would just like to clarify in terms of the fiscal impact. As I mentioned, we do have funding included in the big bill, and that was the 18.3, of which 20 million is this amendment would add to get to the 38. But our best estimate to carry this program through to March is 54 million. So we are talking about not only the 20, but we would be talking about additional money as well. So the 20 million here would not fund the benefit, and it would require 20 plus about another 30. And so I just want people to fully understand what the amendment, the price tag that is accompanying this amendment. Thank you.
Question is, shall the bill be amended as offered by the senator from Wyndham and Chittenden Central in the first instance? Senator from Chittenden Central.
First, I want to thank the committee for all of their hard work on this year's budget. I did get a little taste of that process this morning as I searched through the budget for money to fund this program, and I don't envy them their job. I further want to applaud the many critical investments in housing that are made in this budget. That said, we're in a crisis still. The pandemic emergency may be waning, but the housing emergency only continues to grow. We need to keep people housed at the same time that we are building sustainable long-term solutions. There's never a time when living on the streets is not dangerous, traumatic, and destabilizing. When I worked for Pathways Vermont, I came to adopt the tenet that housing is a human right as my personal ethos. I saw firsthand day after day that it was nearly impossible while living on the streets to hold a job, stay healthy, engage with treatment and medical care, or to lead a humane and dignified life. I also got to see the transformation that was possible in people's lives when they became stably housed. Now, I agree, the motel program is unsustainable, is absolutely not the best housing option. In fact, it's really strange for me to be standing up here today in support of this program, as I have advocated for more than a decade to invest in less expensive, less traumatic, more permanent solutions. But that has not happened yet. And a hotel room is better than living on the streets. I still support investments in these long-term solutions and advocate that we continue forward as this budget does start to do. But I don't believe that while we wait for these investments and solutions to come to fruition, that we should allow thousands of Vermonters to live on the streets. Thank you.
The question is, shall the bill be further amended as offered by the senators from Windham and Chittenden Central, as offered on the handout in the first instance of amendment only? Are you ready for that question? If so, all those in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed indicate by saying nay.
Nay.
The nays appear to have it. The nays do have it, and you have failed to further amend the bill as offered on the handout in the first instance. The question now is, shall the bill be amended as offered by the senators from Windham and Chittenden Central in the second, third, and fourth instances? Senator from Franklin.
Thank you, Mr. President. I serve on the Senate Economic, Housing, and General Affairs Committee. And for this particular provision regarding relocating workers, it's something that we've had in statute for several years, and I've been fortunate enough to be the reporter on this segment for the committee for those past years. I look at the list of the report from the Committee on Appropriations. It's 168 pages. And I defy you to find anything else in that bill that actually makes money for the state of Vermont besides the relocating worker program. The statistics that we have indicate that for every person that we recruit in that fashion, we get a return on investment, and of the higher paid people, we get a return on investment through increased taxes and other economic activity in the first year. And in many of the others, we get a return on investment in the second year that they're here, because it brings people to the state. And bear in mind, we have a housing crisis. We talked about that a lot, and there's many things in this bill that deal with the housing crisis. But we also have a demographic crisis. If we're going to do all the things that people want us to do, then we need more people to fill the 20,000 plus open jobs that we have right now that are not being filled by the bodies. We've got to increase our labor force, and we need those critical skills. We have people right now who perhaps want to move to Vermont, such as the people that we're trying to attract here. And we're trying to produce an incentive to get them to come here because they have choices. They can go to other places. The amount of money that we spend per person is relatively modest. And we're talking here about $1 million in an $8.5 billion budget, 1/8,500th the budget. Decimal dust, as it's sometimes called. But it's real money. And the amount that individuals get is relatively small. But what we have found, both through interviews of people who are considering the program and people who've been in it, it does two basic things. It adds one more tool to our toolbox, as someone had mentioned earlier today, to help us convince people to move to Vermont and help us fill those labor shortages that we have. That's a critical thing for us to accomplish. And it does so at low cost and at a high rate of return. And I recommend strongly that we retain this. And by the way, this $1 million, we started with a $4 million proposal in the Economic Development Committee, and it was cut down through the process that we all go through in order to get this to be a balanced budget by the Committee on Appropriations. And we support leaving that $1 million in place. Thank you, Mr. President.
The question is, shall the bill be further amended as offered by the senators from Windham and Chittenden Central in the second, third, and fourth instances? Are you ready for the question? If so, all those in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed indicate by saying nay.
No.
The nays appear to have it. The nays do have it, and you have failed to further amend the bill. We now have up for consideration an amendment offered by the senator from Orleans, Senator Starr, that is being distributed. Senator from Caledonia.
Thank you, Mr. President. Very short amendment that's clarifying language. The first part of the amendment deals with the organic milk producers. We wanted to make sure that all organic milk producers were paid, and so we had to clarify the language to add in number 2 there, processed of its own milk. So if the farmer didn't ship it to a dealer but processed it on the farm, they would still be paid. In the second instance, it's clarifying language that once upon all the payments are made, if they run out of money, the agency will no longer award payments. And if they make all the payments and there's money left over, that it would be moved to the Working Lands Program. And in the last section 1101, really it's just dropping the S off the word grants. So these are all pretty short, simple amendments, and the committee vote in the Ag Committee was 5-0-0, and we did go to the Appropriations Committee. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator from Orleans. Senator from Caledonia.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senate Appropriations Committee reviewed this amendment. We understand the need to add these clarifications, and we support this amendment. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator from Caledonia. The question now is, shall the bill be further amended as noticed in the amendment by the Senator from Orleans? Are you ready for that question? If so, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed, nay. The ayes have it, and you have further amended the bill as proposed by the Senator from Orleans. Are there any further amendments before third reading? Seeing none, please listen to the third reading of the bill.
H 494, an act relating to making appropriations for the support of government.
Now you've heard the third reading of the bill. The question is, shall the bill pass? Are you ready for that question? Senator from Rutland.
Thank you, Mr. President. I know we've been here a long time. I did want to offer my thoughts on the big bill, if I could. While there are many provisions in this budget that represent goals that we all want in this chamber and in this General Assembly, I do believe that the price tag, which is a 13% increase from the previous budget, is too expensive and is not sustainable. We need to consider the consensus economic forecasts, which indicate that state revenues could peak this year in FY23 and be followed by a potential 9% decline in revenue in FY24, followed by a slow, moderate increase in succeeding years. The 13% increase does not take into account additional taxes that are being considered for childcare and paid family leave. It also does not address how we will pay for universal school meals, what the ultimate cost of the clean heat standard is, and likely OPR fee increases. I do want to express my deep appreciation to the Senate Appropriations Committee for putting much of the match funding back in the budget
and in general, improving what came over from the other body. But while I very much support many of the provisions, I simply cannot vote for something which I think does put the state at risk. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator. The Senator from Caledonia.
Thank you, Mr. President. I would like to just rise to clarify the 13% or 14% includes one-time money. And so if you're looking at the base increase, we did have to increase the base, as I mentioned, 18 million to deal with the pensions, which the budget as proposed by the governor did not. And so as we're looking at adjusting, what we have is more in the range of about, 6.1%. The House had over 8.9. So I do want to at least clarify that while the overall, you have to distinguish, and we worked very hard not to build a base that was going to create the pressure unrealistically on outer-year funding. We also know, in addition to the forecast, that we've been experiencing revenues in the form of direct applications that are not included in our forecast. And they predominantly come from Department of Financial Regulation, but some from surplus property. And those revenues have been having a run rate of about $90 to $110 million, and they're not included in the forecast. So I just want to clarify and restate that, yes, we absolutely do need to be concerned about the base that we're building, the sustainability, and I hope that, that we have been able to build a budget that we think is sustainable and responsible. And just please be clear that, that a lot of money that we have here is one time, and it's simply because of revenues being so inflated as a result of, over the last several years, over $10 billion of federal money flowing through the state's economy. And we're going to be unwinding, and we're getting into unknown territory. Certainly, I think we all share that concern about what that new fiscal reality would look like. But I would just like to point out that it's important to keep in mind that we're dealing with both base spending here and one-time spending, which this larger amount of revenues has permitted us to do, and to make investments in ways that we otherwise would not be able to do. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator. Senator from Franklin.
Thank you, Mr. President. We're probably at a point in this debate in which we can paraphrase one of the late members of the other body, that everything that needs to be said has been said, and now everybody has said it. But in all of that, I think one thing that's important to remember as we step back is we are different than the U.S. House of Representatives and the U.S. Senate, and what we've read in newspapers lately, we're a lot different from legislatures in other states. We talked to each other, and this was a process that was fully collaborative, in which everybody was listened to, and through the debate, results were reached. Maybe it didn't agree with everyone in every respect, but we did a lot of good things in this budget. Some of us have had concerns about the totality of it, but we addressed the real problems that are affecting Vermont and Vermonters, and we did so in a very collegial fashion. I want to express my appreciation to the members of the Appropriations Committee, because this is hard work. It's work that potentially makes everybody mad at you and not everybody 100% happy. But it's essential work that we have to do, because we're we're the only state in the nation that is not forced to balance its budget, either by law or by its constitution. And regardless of which party's in power, we always balance the budget. And so therefore, I do express my appreciation to everybody who participated in this process, especially to the Committee on Appropriations, and most especially on its chair, who did a magnificent job of steering us through these muddy waters. So thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator from Franklin. Senator from Caledonia.
As chair, I guess I can rise again. A few years ago, I said presenting a budget, it reminded me of the Meatloaf song. I want you, I need you, but there ain't no way I'm really gonna love you. And, we do need a budget, and we need a budget, but we don't always love everything in the budget, and that is the role of your Appropriations Committee. We try to balance it all out, so just keep in mind, 2 out of 3 ain't bad.
Having reached the meatloaf segment of the debate, I will repeat the question. Shall H-494 pass? Are you ready for that question? If so, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, nay.
Nay.
The ayes have it. The ayes appear to have it. The ayes do have it, and you have passed H-494. That brings us to S-141, which was committed to the Government Operations Committee, which reports that it ought to pass. Please listen to the second reading of the bill.
S-141, an act relating to approval of the charter of the Fairfax Fire District Number 1.
For the favorable report from the Government Operations Committee, I would turn to the senator from Windsor, Senator White.
Thank you, Mr. President. Why is everyone leaving? The charter I'm about to describe to you. Okay. Your humble Government Operations Committee submits on a 6-0-0 vote to the Senate floor S-141. This bill creates the Fairfax Fire District Number 1. Now, you may be asking yourself, are we creating a new fire district? The answer is yes. Hasn't the trend been the dissolution of fire districts in our state as requested by towns? Also, yes. This is a unique situation. Today is our lucky day because we have the opportunity to create this fire district, and even more exciting is that this bill started in the Senate. Thank you, the senator from Chittenden North, for introducing. Rather, you would be familiar with the House traditionally introducing charters. We are doing it a different way today. Our committee reviewed the request with the help of local officials who described that the Fairfax Fire District in the 1990s was formed. We even have newsletters and maps, which I'm not using as a prop, but are here if you would like to see them. It is unclear what happened to the paperwork of the formed Fairfax Fire District Number 1, but we do not have clear confirmation of its creation. So that is why we are here today. So I would describe our affirmation of the Fairfax Fire District Number 1 as confirmation that what we believe to have already been created as a fire district should be allowed to continue as a fire district with the current elected members on the board, giving them the ability to still do their work. The witness list was Tucker Anderson, our legislative counsel, Emily Morgan, the clerk and Prudential Committee chair of the Fairfax Fire District Number 1, and the senator from Chittenden North. I ask for your support of this charter change. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator from Windsor. The question is, shall the bill be read the third time? Are you ready for that question? If so, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, nay. The ayes have it, and you have asked for third reading of S-141. We have on the calendar H-150, which was also committed to the Government Operations Committee, which reports that it ought to pass. Please listen to the second reading of that bill.
H-150, an act relating to approval of an amendment to the charter of the Village of Alburgh.
For the favorable report from the Government Operations Committee, I would look to the senator from Franklin, Senator Norris.
Thank you, Mr. President. It's always an honor to follow my esteemed colleague and try to stay pace with her, but I'll do my best anyway. H-150 is a very short proposal of amendment to the Village of Alburgh. For those who are not familiar with the Village of Alburgh, it's a very unique, quaint village that lies in the upper portion of Grand Isle County, scenic Grand Isle County, bordered by Lake Champlain. Having said that, it seemed to have a problem or two within the village. There's a population of approximately 550 people. They can't seem to find anybody to fulfill the positions of town clerk and or treasurer. And in order to do this, they have to convince someone from within the village to run for office, which they've been unsuccessful in doing. So this approval, this proposal of amendment hopefully will allow than to take care of the problems by allowing the select board to appoint positions, thus allowing them to go outside the village of Alberg. So to the bill, section 1. On September 6th of 2022, voters at a properly warned meeting had a vote and approved the proposal amendment by a vote of 19-2, which in looking at their population, it was 3.7%. However, going one step further, their official voting population is 358, so it brought that back up to 5.7% of the voting population. Anyways, it's successful. It passed. Section 301A1 simply removes the clerk and treasurer as elected positions and allows the select board to appoint those particular positions. On the backside, 301C, appointed officers. It allows the village board of trustees to appoint a village clerk and treasurer, and the clerk and treasurer do not need to be residents of Alberg Village or the village of Alberg. Section 3 states that on May 1st, 2023, the village trustee shall appoint the village clerk and treasurer, and the term of any elected official in those two positions shall expire. Section 4 is the effective date should take effect on passage. We heard from Tucker Anderson, Legislative Counsel, Office of Legislative Counsel, Ashley Angel, Law Clerk, Office of Legislative Counsel, Cheryl Dunn, Board Chair, and also interim Town Clerk, amongst many other positions, probably the fence viewer up there too, as far as I know. But she's a very pleasant lady, and she's looking for some approval here. And Representative Michael Morgan, the reporter of the bill, it came out of your Senate Gov Ops Committee on a vote of 6-0-0, and we ask for the Senate support. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator from Franklin. The question is, shall the bill be read the third time? Are you ready for that question? If so, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed, nay. The ayes have it, and you have ordered third reading of H150. We have on the calendar H110, which was committed to the Committee on Finance and which reports that when amended, the bill ought to pass. Please listen to the second reading of that bill.
H110, an act relating to extending the sunset under 30 VSA Section 248A.
For the report of the Committee on Finance, I would recognize the Senator from Chittenden Southeast, Senator Chitney.
Thank you, Mr. President. In speaking to the amendment, I am inextricably also speaking to the underlying bill, so I won't explicitly seek your permission to do so. I hope that conforms to all appropriate decorum and Mason's rules. I also fortuitously drafted two floor speeches.
Senator, you did not wait for the approval.
May I speak to both the amendment and the underlying bill? I guess I did not conform to Mason's rules. I was trying something there. All right. So I fortuitously drafted two floor speeches, a short one and a long one. Looking at the late hour, I'm going to give the short one, but if anybody would like additional information about this bill, I'd be happy to give it at third reading. This bill proposes to extend another 3-year extension to the sunset of 248A. First passed in 2007, this will be the 6th time this sunset has been extended, validating some prevailing opinions about sunsets in this building. This 248A process also this 248A process allows companies and persons wishing to construct a telecommunications facility to do so by applying to the Public Utilities Commission for a certificate of public good. Your Senate Finance Committee amended this extension to address concerns heard that the PUC process should be more accessible and user-friendly to persons with interests in these projects. This amendment adds a study to address how to make this process easier for municipalities and individuals to participate. The study will also examine how to encourage municipal participation and recommend any necessary updates to the law. Your Senate Finance Committee heard from 15 individuals. I will not list them all now, but happy to report them at third reading. Your Senate Finance Committee did vote 5-1-1 in support of this report, and we urge the Senate to concur.
Thank you, Senator from Chittenden Southeast. The question is, shall the Senate propose to amend the bill as proposed by the Committee on Finance? Are you ready for that question? Senator from Chittenden Southeast.
Thank you, Mr. President. May I inquire of the reporter?
The reporter will be interrogated.
So given that it's in prevailing interest of those in the building, does this mean I will not have to set my clock back or forward again? Thank you, Mr. President.
I do not know how to answer that question, Mr. President.
I believe the interrogation has ended. Thank you, Senators. The question again is, shall the Senate propose to amend the bill as proposed by the Committee on Finance? Senator from
Thank
Madison.
you. May I inquire the reporter?
Reporter will be interrogated.
Thank you. This is actually a serious question. You mentioned a report, and I don't see it in the bill. Am I missing something in the bill, Mr. President?
So if you read line 17 of the draft out, I read, on or before January 15, 2024, the Commissioner of Public Service in consultation with the Public Utility Commission shall report to the Senate Committee on Finance and the House Committee on Environment and Energy of the process. The inquiry is, the report shall address how to make the process easier to participate municipalities and individuals.
Okay. With apologies, Mr. President, I was looking at the House passed version. I didn't realize there was a change, so thank you.
Thank you. Shall the Senate propose to amend the bill as proposed by the Committee on Finance? Are you ready for that question? If so, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed, nay. The ayes have it, and you have amended the bill as proposed by the Committee on Finance. Question now is, shall the bill be read the third time? Are you ready for that question? If so, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed, nay. You have ordered third reading of H110. I believe that takes us through the orders of the day, with H479 being passed over. With that, I would look to the Senator from Windsor for an adjournment motion.
Thank you, Mr. President. Pending announcements, I would move that the Senate adjourn until Friday, April 28th at 11:30 a.m.
Senator from Windsor has moved that Senate stand in adjournment until 11:30 a.m. Friday, April 28th. For announcements, Senator from Caledonia.
I would hope this is appropriate. I would like to make the motion to suspend the rules and message the action just taken on H494, the budget bill, be messaged to the House forthwith.
Senator from Caledonia has moved that our rules be suspended in order to message our actions just taken on H494 to the House forthwith. Are you ready for that question? If so, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed, nay. The ayes have it, and you have suspended the rules to message your actions on H494. Further announcements. Senator from Madison.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senate Government Operations will meet at the fall of the gavel. We have witnesses waiting. And also tomorrow, if we have time, we will be doing appointments. And so if you have an underlined appointment, please make sure you're ready to repeat it. Thank you.
Senator from Bennington.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senate Education will meet 5 minutes after the fall of the gavel.
Senator from Washington.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senate Finance will meet 5 minutes after the fall of the gavel.
And the Senator from Essex.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senate institutions will not be meeting 15 minutes after the fall of the gavel.
Any further announcements? Seeing none, the Senator from Windsor has moved that the Senate stand in adjournment until 11:30 a.m. Friday, April 28th. Are you ready for that question? If so, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed, nay. The ayes have it, and we will stand in adjournment until 11:30 a.m., April 28th.